when Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished on March 8, 2014, with 239 people on board. The world was thrust into disbelief and confusion. In the years since, a tangled web of theories has tried to explain how a modern airliner could simply disappear. At the heart of this mystery are multiple explanations, each with its own evidence and limitations. The first and perhaps most controversial is the pilot suicide hypothesis, which centers on Captain Zahariya Ahmad Shah. Some investigators and commentators have pointed to a number of circumstances that suggest he may have intentionally downed the plane. Before takeoff, Captain Zahari requested additional fuel, more than was strictly necessary for the planned flight to Beijing. While this could be dismissed as an abundance of caution, skeptics interpret it as an indication of premeditation. Further fueling suspicion was the discovery that Zahari's personal home flight simulator contained a previously deleted simulated flight path over the remote southern Indian Ocean, eerily similar to what the investigation would later conclude was MH370's final, fatal trajectory. Additionally, Zahari was an active supporter of Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who was sentenced to prison the very day before the flight disappeared, a detail that some theorists link to possible emotional or psychological turmoil. The theory's narrative posits a chilling scenario. Once MH370 was established on its course, Zahari allegedly depressurized the cabin, incapacitating passengers and crew quietly. He would then have flown alone, silently and deliberately, until the fuel was exhausted, leading to a final descent into the vast ocean, where discovery would be nearly impossible. But despite its disturbing plausibility, several cracks appear in this hypothesis. No suicide note was left behind. Zahari's psychological profile revealed no obvious red flags, and those who knew him described a dedicated, experienced pilot. No clear motive has ever been established, leaving open questions that undermine the certainty of this explanation. An alternative perspective comes from aviation analyst Chris Goodfellow, who proposed the possibility of a cockpit fire or catastrophic mechanical failure. According to this view, a malfunction, perhaps an electrical fire, could have filled the cockpit with smoke, prompting the pilots to disable communications in a desperate bid to isolate the source and preserve control. In such overwhelming conditions, the crew might be overcome by smoke inhalation before being able to make an emergency call. The aircraft on autopilot would then continue its journey, ghost-like and silent, until finally plunging into the ocean once its fuel was spent. This explanation resonates with the history of aviation disasters, where mechanical faults and cascading failures have led to catastrophic outcomes. Its strengths lie in its simplicity and adherence to known risks. However, it falls short when scrutinizing specific details of MH370's final flight. The anomaly of the extra fuel request and the apparent rerouting of the plane toward the southern Indian Ocean are difficult to reconcile with an accidental fire scenario. Such elements suggest a degree of planning or intention that a purely mechanical failure scenario cannot account for. A third leading theory revolves around hijacking or terrorism. The day after MH370 vanished, it emerged that 2 passengers had boarded using stolen passports, an alarming revelation that triggered global concern and suspicion. Given the history of coordinated terror attacks, including the September 11th attacks and other aviation incidents worldwide, investigators could not discount the possibility that the plane was commandeered for nefarious purposes. Malaysia itself has been considered a nation vulnerable to terrorist activity, lending some credibility to this thread. Still, there are crucial shortcomings here too. No terrorist group stepped forward to claim responsibility, no plausible demands were communicated, and forensic searches did not uncover any explosive residue. In the absence of clear evidence, bomb fragments, intercepted communications, or claims of guilt, The terrorism theory remains speculative at best. As more conventional explanations have failed to yield answers, some have turned to the realm of the extraordinary. Interdimensional or supernatural theories, while outside the boundaries of scientific possibility, persist among those desperate for closure. These include ideas that MH370 entered some kind of time rift or wormhole, vanishing from our reality, only to reappear elsewhere or elsewhen. Such notions echo urban legends, most notably the tale of Flight 914, the plane that supposedly disappeared in 1955 and re-emerged in 1992. An unproven story that endures nonetheless. For the scientifically minded and experienced investigators, such claims are not just unlikely. They are untenable. Yet, their very persistence underlines the human need for answers in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. If one theme unites all these theories, it is the volume of what we do not know. For every element that seems explained, another remains stubbornly opaque. Each explanation is undermined by the lack of concrete evidence. Each theory is haunted by critical unanswered questions. The investigation into MH370's disappearance has not only confronted the limitations of current science and technology, but also exposed daunting bureaucratic and organizational hurdles. From the very beginning, confusion and a slow official response hampered search efforts. The crucial hours and days after the flight disappeared were marred by miscommunication between nations and agencies, delays in confirming basic facts, and errors in tracking the aircraft's last signals. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, entrusted with leading the search, came under fire for mistakes made during the early stages of the operation, including misinterpretations of satellite data that sent search vessels in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, Malaysian authorities faced criticism for opacity and apparent reluctance to share information. This perceived lack of transparency fueled suspicions both among the international community and the families of the missing, weakening trust and obstructing international cooperation. Public dissatisfaction soon spilled into the streets, with protests demanding the full, unfettered release of all available information. The scale of the global search effort that followed was unprecedented. In the years after MH370's disappearance, more than $180 million was spent, with search teams scouring some 120,000 square kilometers of the southern Indian Ocean, an expanse larger than many nations. Ships, planes, deep-sea drones, and satellites were employed. Yet even the aircraft's black boxes, the flight recorders designed to survive catastrophic crashes, remained elusive. Not a single definitive piece of wreckage was found within the primary search zone during those initial years, confounding experts and devastating hope. As the search dragged on, the most profound impact was felt not by researchers or officials, but by the families of the 239 people who vanished. These husbands, wives, children, and parents remained trapped in an endless cycle of hope and despair, forced to live without closure or certainty. With no bodies recovered, no confirmed cause for the accident, and only fragmentary evidence painstakingly washed up on faraway beaches, the emotional pain is relentless. For relatives like Ghislain Watralos, a French engineer who lost his wife and 2 children, the agony is compounded by the feeling that the disaster is slowly being forgotten as time passes and media coverage fades. Each broken promise and failed lead reopens wounds, and the persistent speculation, often sensational and insensitive, only sharpens their grief. While the world moves on to new headlines, for the loved ones of those lost on MH370, the pain is as raw as ever. Their greatest fear is not just that the remains of the flight may never be found, but that the memories of those aboard will simply dissolve into obscurity. Against this backdrop of grief and frustration, hope flickers on, even if only faintly. Could MH370 still be discovered somewhere, hidden in an as-yet unexplored trench or corner of the ocean? Could the possibility, however vanishingly small, exist that the plane landed intact on some remote strip of land, its passengers waiting, held, or even living in secrecy? Rationally, these scenarios seem close to impossible. The technical data, ocean drift patterns, and countless hours of investigation have narrowed the field to a conclusion that is grim. The plane was lost at sea, and survival is almost certainly impossible after so many years. And yet, for the families, the absence of proof is not proof of absence. So long as no conclusive evidence is found, every theory stays alive a little longer. If hope is a form of resistance, then for the grieving, it is a lifeline that keeps despair at bay, even when reality offers so little comfort. Ultimately, the disappearance of MH370 is more than just a tragedy for the families, or even for the aviation industry as a whole. It stands as the greatest mystery in the history of modern aviation, defying explanation and undermining faith in the systems designed to keep us safe in the skies. Never before has a jetliner vanished so completely, leaving so few traces and so many unanswered questions. Despite massive expenditure, the deployment of the best technology available, and unprecedented international collaboration, no definitive answer has been found. The core question lingers, chilling and unresolved. Was the disappearance of MH370 a deliberate act, a tragic accident, or something wholly unanticipated by science or reason? The lack of closure reverberates beyond the families of those aboard. It strikes at the heart of our belief in progress, technology, and global cooperation. It reminds us of the enduring vulnerability of humanity on a planet where oceans, nature, and fate can still humble even our most sophisticated endeavors. More than a decade since that flight vanished, we are left with an echoing plea for understanding, a plea that persists, unanswered, over the endless waves. MH370 is not just a puzzle for investigators. It is a deeply human mystery, one that asks us to reckon with uncertainty and the limits of our knowledge. In the end, the story of MH370 is about far more than one missing flight. It is about the intermingled terror and awe inspired by a world that, even now, holds secrets too vast for us to grasp. The question, "Where is MH370?" has become not just a technical query, but a symbol of every unknown shadow at the edge of our collective understanding. Until the day the truth surfaces, if it ever does, MH370 will remain a symbol of both tragedy and the eternal human quest for answers in the face of unimaginable loss.